Does what?
Does this work? Like, you know people that have become atheist Christians?
Oh, absolutely.
J. Warner Wallace, who he mentioned, is a professor out at Biola where I am currently attending classes, and was an atheist for 25 years.
Lee Strobel.
And Lee Strobel. And so that's really the origin of J. Warner Wallace's book, Cold Case Christianity, is where he approached the Gospels as if he were doing a cold case, where there were no eyewitnesses that were left around, and he started to investigate, and that's how he came to Christianity as well. So,
and it's not just
yes.
those two.
And let me make a real quick point, if that's all right. This isn't just, the methodology of apologetics isn't just for evangelism. When you say something like, does it work? Oftentimes we say that, or we ask that question, not saying that you did. It's in the line of, well, how many people have you converted doing this? Well, I think that's maybe a loaded question, because by saying, does it work, why can't it be, this is a methodology for edification and drawing oneself closer to God. So it's not just about how many atheists have you converted, but this is also a method and also a subject that helps draw us closer to God, because let's face it, there are going to be times in your life where you're going to feel distant from God and your feelings aren't going to be there. Well, I firmly believe that with apologetics allows our head to anchor our faith until our feelings catch up. And if I have that at my disposal, then it makes it easier for me to cope when my feelings aren't there, because my head knows that it's true. Brian.
I have two comments. One kind of parlays off that one. There's a famous group that goes around, 2 people at a time knocking on your door. When you answer the door, it's usually the younger one that starts talking, because that one's in training. And you can start to challenge that person's faith, and then the older one will step in front and start taking over.
Yeah.
But anyway, the Bible tells us to have a ready answer.
Yep.
That's why this is important. I appreciate what the gentlemen have done for the last 2 days, is that you've taken a very factual-based approach to this very emotional issue, and I appreciate that. What we have to do, what we have to be careful about, I've had friends who are Christians who will say things, for example, when the Hubble telescope first went up and it didn't work. Basically, he was giving reference to the hand of God making it so it wouldn't work. And
Yeah.
the reason for that is because, well, people have a struggle with that if the universe is expanding, and they think that disproves God.
Yeah.
And yet, if we lay our hat on something that says, this can't be true, otherwise God doesn't exist, and then science proves otherwise, that we just denied God. And that's what we need to be careful about. God doesn't need us to prove He exists. He does that every day. If we try to say that God's not going to let man understand His universe,
Yeah.
and we're denying God being able to prove His.
No, I think what, and I think the gist of what you're getting at there, Brett, is as believers, as Christians, we can't be scared of scientific discovery. We can't be scared of that. That's not something that we should fret about, because God knew about that discovery long before we did. So I think that's a good point that you've made with regards to what you've said. And I appreciate the compliment that you've given us as well.
I'd like to finish up with, right now, the big push is trying to prove that life existed on Mars.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I sit here and I say, no, life never existed anywhere but on this earth, and some way, somehow, they discover life, what does that mean to my belief? Absolutely nothing. Because God never said He limited life to this planet.
No, I
We tend to want to believe that, just like at one point we want to believe the earth is flat.
Yeah.
Even though within the Bible it tells us that it's round.
in Isaiah, it talks about that. Yeah.
We have all these things. We got to be very, very careful about making those jumps to judgment and then saying that that proves God or disproves God.
Yeah.
God made one part of his creation in the soul. And I don't care if you have dogs on Mars or not.
No, that's a good point. And also, there's also, there could be, as they do more investigation into something like life on Mars, there could be a reason for that is because of what they call space litter or something like that has taken place within our own planet that has made it to Mars. I think that's a viable explanation too, but I get what you're saying with regards to that. We can't, the danger in apologetics, I would say, is that sometimes we might be, there can be the danger of basing all of my faith solely on empirical evidence. Right? And the danger in that is there are some things with the divine that I'll never be able to empirically prove. And so then now I've got myself into a conundrum. So it's a balancing act. So for instance, if someone said, like we talked about the Trinity, no way I could ever empirically, through the scientific method, prove that the Trinity existed or exists. Right? Couldn't do that. There's no lab work that I could do, run through some circuits, some beakers, and say, ha! I found the Trinity. If that was the case, then I'd get a lot of Nobel Peace Prizes, right? And I wouldn't have to work another day in my life. But that's besides the point. But you see what I'm saying there with that? So
I just want to say that going back to what Brett was saying about potentially finding life on Mars, that maybe I would just be happy that David Bowie would get an answer to his question.
Do it. All right. Any other questions about what we looked at? Any questions about us as a group at Apologia? Anything like that?
How did all you guys come together? I know you and Jack.
How did we get together? How did the Beatles form? No, hey, I've made a positive comment about the Beatles.
I know.
There you go. Okay, so how long has it been? A year or so we've been around? About a year ago, last September? Last September or 2 Septembers ago? I forget. 2 Septembers ago. I was looking at the landscape in the church with regards to apologetics, and there's a big, heavy, not disparaging any group, thankful for the groups that precede us, but notice that there's a heavy emphasis on debunking evolution, six-day creation, things like that. Not that that's bad. I agree that those are areas that need to be explored. But I also noticed there are two things that were kind of lacking in the stream of apologetics in the church. In my opinion, that's just my opinion. One, things that were that would catch the eye of the younger generation, and two, an emphasis on the philosophical and historical arguments for the Christian worldview. And so, and other was the experience, actually the story that I told the first night in the second session about the young person who went off to college and had a class was actually a young lady that had been to Carolina Bible Camp for like 10 years. And so it's from that I called up Jack, and I called up another gentleman by the name of Brian Cunningham, who for health reasons is no longer with us, and said, hey, we got to do something. I said, I don't know what it is right now. I said, but we've got to do something, that is social media driven, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook driven, not just for young people, but also for parents, because most teens aren't going to read an 1,800-word technical article. Yeah, they're going to read, maybe, if they read at all, just kidding, young people. They're going to read a tweet, they're going to read a blog that's like 800 words. They'd rather watch a YouTube video. And so that's the genesis of kind of the first initial thing. So then I went out to Bear Valley like a week after that and met a guy by the name of Nathan Liddell. And he came up to me and asked me who I was, this, that, and the other. And we kind of we clicked. So he was a part of the group. And then Jason Hyde, who I went to Bear Valley with. If you ever want to talk to a guy about the evidence for the soul, Jason Hyde's your guy. Don't ask me. I'm a noob when it comes to that. And so that's just kind of how we've all gotten together. Since then, Forrest Amatisaurus from Freed Hardeman. I don't know if you know Forrest or not. He graduates. He's a guest writer. Dwayne Bryant, who was at Southeast, preaches in Texas. He's a guest writer now. So that's just kind of the story of how we've all gotten together with the thankful blessing. This is recording still? With the thankful blessing of our wives. Yes, it's there. So, they sacrifice a lot.
By the way, Brian is doing better. The way that Dean made it sound was that he's no longer with us due to
No, he's still alive. He's not dead.
He's doing okay.
Sorry, Brian. I know you're not deceased. So, but that's kind of the story of how we got together. Yes, ma'am.
What is the status today of the young lady you keep referring to?
The young lady, she just graduated college and is still a Christian. So it works. There you go. So I keep her name out of it per her request. So
I don't even know who it is.
Hike to the vest. So, all right. Anything else? If not, I just want to punch a couple of things talked about from the last night that I didn't get a chance to talk about. If there's not any pressing question, because I don't want anybody to go away confused. So, multiple times last night, as role-playing as the atheist, I asked the question, well, how do you know that Mark wrote Mark? Or how do you know that Matthew wrote Matthew? Or how do you know that John wrote John? And I got some blank looks. So anybody on the outset have an idea of how we know that? The main answer from that is church history. Church fathers record that, but I'd like to even take another step. And I think it was Brett last night that made a point, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, that I said it doesn't bother you that Matthew didn't write Matthew, and I think you said no. Is that right? You didn't say that? Okay, sorry. And here's the thing, on the base of it, as I'm meeting the skeptic where the skeptic is, it's okay to go ahead and say, all right, so let's say Matthew didn't write it. They still have to disprove the content is not historical. Right? So on the basis, yes, it matters to us. But as I'm talking to a skeptic who doesn't believe that the New Testament was written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I would just go say, okay, for the sake of the conversation, let's say that they didn't write it. So what? Still have to show that that's not historical. Does that make sense? So let's not. So one of the things that we're going to have to do as Christians is we're going to have to be comfortable going outside of our own set boxes to meet the skeptic where the skeptic is. Things like, all right, I'll cede to you for the sake of the conversation that the Big Bang is true. Still requires a creator. I'm going to cede to you that Matthew didn't write Matthew. You still have to show that this isn't historically reliable content. Does that make sense? So don't fall into that trap. And plus, there's good evidence from church fathers that these guys wrote these books as well. Yes? Church fathers are instrumental, influential leaders shortly after the apostles died and significantly after that. So like you have the ante-Nicene fathers who are influential church leaders prior to the Council of Nicaea, which is like 325 AD, right? And so then you have the post-Nicene fathers who are influential church leaders after the Council of Nicaea. So that's what I mean by church fathers. Guys that are not direct disciples of Jesus, guys that are not apostles linked with Jesus, but after the apostles die out, they are the ones that are the influential leaders in the church.
Yeah, and we can't stress that enough, that a lot of what the church fathers wrote, it's amazing how quickly a lot of them began to divert from biblical teaching. It's crazy, but it doesn't change the fact that a lot of these church fathers, like he said, were not direct disciples of Jesus, were not even apostles, but were disciples of the apostles. So a lot of these come right after the apostles do.
So a good example of that would be a guy by the name of Polycarp. Polycarp is an early church father who's executed by the Romans at the age of 86 years old, who studied under John the apostle.
Yeah.
Right? And so the story of Polycarp is that he's brought before the governor, and the governor says, and I'm paraphrasing here, and the governor says, hey, denounce your Christianity and you can go free. And he basically says, he says, for 86 years I've served him well and he's never done me any harm. Why would I stop doing it now? And basically says, do what you got to do, and they feed him to lions. Yeah, be a Christian in 80. So that's what I mean by early church fathers. Yes, sir.
We can also talk about the consistency throughout so many different books, so many different authors, and all that. Cheryl's currently reading a series of books by an individual author, and it's all theoretically one story, various events, and has all sorts of things that are inconsistent within it, and that's one of them. And that author says, I never said I would be consistent. But yet, here we have lots of different authors, and we have consistency.
You do.
With not only, you look at it from Genesis to Revelation, it's about that lost relationship with God and God wanting man to return to that relationship.
No, that's true. And I call that historical / undesigned coincidences that are seen throughout the scriptures. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Something more common about the church fathers is that they're not necessarily infallible, but they have direct access
True.
to and knowledge of others.
Yeah, no, that's true. The church fathers are not infallible beings, but they did have, like Cheryl said, they did have access to direct witnesses of Jesus. Very, very true.
All the different denominations kind of cool down.
Man, how much time do we have? Look, it's time to go. No, just kidding. There's the genesis of that late church fathers, post-Nicene fathers. That's where that starts to take place. One question I want to ask you guys, from our perspective, as far as content, not necessarily just here for the seminar, but what are some things that you guys want to see online? For your grandkids, for your kids, for yourself? What are some of the ways that we online can serve the general populace, the general population, as far as online? What are some things that you want to see? Yes, ma'am.
So a lot of this is very complicated, and even for someone who is scientifically minded and intelligent, it's still very complicated. So I guess and you said a few of the things, like when you said the Big Bang Theory. Okay, for this conversation, I'll admit this.
Yeah.
So things like that, things like that we can actually use in day-to-day conversation when we're not talking to other people that are just as intelligent, or possibly that we're not just as intelligent as that, but use the things that are like, oh, that brings it back together. Oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. So that makes sense to people that aren't scientifically minded at all.
Gotcha. So one of the sections that we probably need to develop more as far as our online blog sections is our practical apologetics section. There are some things that are there, but I think that's a good point. So what we'll do in that section is, as we talk about something like the Trinity, for instance, or the Big Bang or anything like that. We'll make that section, we'll develop that section to be more practical. Hey, here's an illustration that you can use when talking to somebody who's a skeptic about A, B, C, or D. Right. So I think that's a good suggestion.
Just to kind of clarify, because I want to take some of these down there. Are you talking about kind of almost like, I mean, what he said, but like a made easy sort of segment?
And so, just like you said, there's a lot of people that, will bring in the big bag. There's a lot of people that will bring this defense, all those common defenses where I personally don't really have an explanation or a defense for what they're bringing me. So maybe this is the bottom line, dumb it all the way down, but then maybe then you can have this and that. So it puts it on this level.
So let me ask you a follow-up. Would you rather see that in a blog or a video?
Talking about, appealing to the youth, I think they'd rather watch a 2-minute video.
So a 2-minute video over a 800-word blog.
Someone from my generation or myself, I like to read, but talking to, a younger generation.
Okay.
It would be a 2-minute.
Yes, sir.
I think along with that, a lot of people will throw out acronyms and those kinds of things, and you have to be sure that they know what they're even talking about. Somebody will throw out big bang theory. They don't have a clue what that means. They just think that's
Yeah. Yeah.
what you, in your presentation is 4 or 5 questions to ask them what they think that is, and then what it really is.
Yeah.
Then the questions we can ask them later on. Because there's a series of things that people are going to throw and they think they're shutting the door.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say there's nothing worse, and I'm not talking from personal experience, I'm saying hypothetically, there's nothing worse that we could do than get into a conversation with somebody and not be on the same page in terms of concepts, in terms of words. So it's important to, and I don't want to take up much time with this, but I will give a suggestion for a resource that has helped me tremendously, and that's a book called Tactics by Greg Koppel. He says that whenever we go into a conversation with somebody, first off, he says, don't ever be on the offensive. And I don't just mean don't be offended and burst out. Don't be on the offensive. That means let them tell you what they're talking about. So he says, ask a couple of different questions. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? That way it puts it all on them to relay it to you, and then you will have an opportunity, once you know where they're coming from, to say, well, have you thought about this?
Exactly. There's 10 different things that people think are shutting the door in your face, and you know what yours are. You have the tactics, the questions, and then the answers for those in individual presentations that are probably 3 minutes, 4 minutes each, and you got 10 of them.
I think we can definitely pursue that in a video format for sure. Real quick, I'll get to you, Mike. When we went to Lithia Springs for the youth lecture, I was doing my role play, and a kid said, "So, Mr. Atheist person, do you believe in evolution?" And I was hoping somebody was going to ask that last night, because in that moment I said, all right, how many of you here by a show of hands, I was at this youth lecture, I said, how many of you here by a show of hands believe that evolution's false? Every hand went up. I said, all right, how many of you can give me a technical definition of the term? One hand stayed up. And I called on him. And he gave me a decent thing. And that goes back to what you're saying. We need to make sure, just like everybody else, we need to make sure that we're not suckering ourselves into a conversation about something that we don't understand. It was clear from that group that a bunch of people didn't believe in evolution, but a bunch of people didn't know how to define it either. And so I think that's a good point. That's why those questions that Jack's mentioned, what do you mean by that? How do you get there? If that's true, then what? Are good questions to ask, and we will definitely pursue that in a video format and put that online. So, all right, Mike, go ahead.
I know there's some out there available, like Apologia Express, but material that is structured so that it's user-friendly for the Sunday morning Bible class.
Yeah.
Because that's when the bulk of our members are together. It isn't one time. So we use for adults and for the teens.
So So you're talking like apologetics curriculum, is that what you're saying? Or videos or?
Material presented in a class-type structure, it doesn't have to be a whole drawn-out curriculum.
Gotcha. No, okay. No, that's a good point. There's,
Ladies, y'all had,
Do you do anything on like six-day creation? There's a growing number of people who are trying to make a position, a day, what's a day, and different options.
yeah. Do you want to answer that? I'll answer it.
you answer it, then I'll give my sarcastic answer later.
Okay. All right. So currently, we don't have anything with regards to six-day creation. And there's a reason for that. Not because we don't believe in six-day creation, but because there are other organizations who have mined that field really, really well. Apologetics Press, they are on that and have been on it for 30 years. So from at least my standpoint, as somebody as a member of Apologia, I don't want to go and try and reinvent the wheel or lay another foundation that's already been laid 30 years prior. So anytime somebody asks me about six-day creation, I'm going to reference them to Apologetics Press because they've got really great stuff on that. I'm going to say if you want more information about how to meet a skeptic where they are and reason from where they are, then that's kind of our niche. That's our MO, I guess you could say. But as far as shoring up your own ability to defend six-day creation, Apologetics Press, they've got it. They've been on it for 30 years. It just does, for me, I'm speaking for me as a member of Apologia, for me it doesn't make sense to try and step in their sandbox and do what they've been doing for 30 years.
And I won't give my sarcastic answer, but I'll
Thank you,
put it,
Jack.
Yeah, but I, especially, and this is from me, I don't feel that there's, kind of like what Dean was saying, there's anything that we can contribute that would end that debate. I mean, that's until Jesus returns, that's going to be an ongoing debate, and I don't think that we have anything that's going to, bring the gavel down on it. So
Yeah. Plus, I don't know that we necessarily have anybody that would. There's nothing that we're going to bring up or would bring up that they haven't already addressed. So.
And that's not to extend this any longer, but that's why we've taken some of the approaches we have, because in conversations we've had with people, the whole idea of six-day creation has never come up. It's always been establishing, was the universe created? And that's where we've gotten a lot of our discussion and gotten a lot of our opposition, where people say, well, the universe wasn't even created, or the universe is eternal and doesn't need a creator. And so we found that there's more need of establishing a creator than in how long it took him to do it.
Good point. I'm glad you're with us, man. I'm glad you're with me on my team. Okay, so we have ceased classes on Monday nights, but